Yeah, we bring reviews of your house, talk to our dudes of your house. I bring my views of your house, wrestling truths of your house. We talk to you in your house, we keeps it cool in your house, we keeps it cool in your house. I'm spitting truths in your house.
Yes, Mark's hating on his fast. Becky's niche on the man. Play with two like a lions. Household a dangerous alliance. I am an like Cody, and I'm overcoming like Kobe. No, they cannot hold me. Come listen, I'm hosting, critiquing, I'm boasting. This wrestling I'm knowing.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to In Your House, starring Akil House. This is the People's Podcast. Hey guys, you already know who it is. It's your boy Khan, ready to get that work when it comes to this professional wrestling business. That is what we do, and hey, we love it. So let me let you guys know where you guys can listen to this at. You guys can listen to this at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Himalaya. Hey, you don't have an Apple device? That's all right. We're on Google Play. Anywhere that you guys are, we can get to you. And ooh, where is the clock? I'm checking the time because last time that I checked, In Your House was the hottest professional wrestling podcast in the Midwest, because we hit them with that work, round the clock. You guys already know what it is. Oh yes, the director is in the house and in your house for another edition of the Black Awareness Summit, where we are highlighting the racial injustices in this country. Race relations are are definitely tough right now. That's one thing that I really want to highlight, is that there's a lot of rigmarole going around. There's a lot of narrative. There's a lot of misdirecting the narrative as far as what the Black Lives Matter movement is all about, and that's what we're here to do, guys. We are here to raise awareness, to make you guys understand what it's really all about. It is not what you see in the news. It's not what you see in the media. And guys, one thing that I want you to do is keep yourselves informed. That we have to keep ourselves informed. You have to know what is coming at you at all directions. Man, if you're just sitting over there watching just CNN or just Fox News, you are doing yourself a disservice. And in these times right now, with just the intensity of the racism going on right now, it's not a time to be ignorant, folks. You know, we live in the age of information where ignorance is a choice, and we have to do better, y'all. We have to do better, and that's why I decided to put together the Black Awareness Summit. One thing that I do want to touch on real quick, I put it out there on social media. I just want to first quickly thank you guys for making In Your House one of the top 100 professional wrestling podcasts in the United States of America on Apple Podcasts. So truly appreciate you guys for listening and tuning in and always giving us your ears. And now we really need your ears right now. I really need them right now more than ever, because I'm telling you guys out there in the household in the 14 different countries all across these United States and locally right here in Indiana, this, without a doubt, is going to be one of the most important episodes of the Black Awareness Summit that we are going to have. We've had some great episodes. With Barrington Hughes, Cassidy Keith, Congo Kong, the right hand of God, Sam Knight, Paragon, Chase Holiday. We've talked about myself and Hutch going to the civil rights protest in Indianapolis, the largest one that Indianapolis has seen in the last 30 years, and that was heavy. But right now, I had to call in the big guns, guys. I had to call in the big guns because with everything going on in this country today, I want to make sure that I'm doing my part. I want to make sure that I'm keeping you guys informed, and I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to protect my people. And with that being said, I had to bring out the big guns. This next guest here is not only a very important man in his community, but a very important man in my life because I call him my cousin. He is running for the U.S. Congress, the 10th Congressional District of New Jersey. He's a change agent, motivational speaker, ambassador, author, professor. He's done so much. And he's a candidate for the West Orange Township Council in Essex County, freeholder in New Jersey. And that is my cousin, my family, Dr. Akil Khalfani. How are you doing today, Doctor?
Hey, brother, man, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for using your time here. And I know you've been really busy. I totally get it. You've got a lot going on, but I appreciate you coming on and lending your voice to such an important topic.
You know, I want you to know, and all your listeners to know, that I'm honored to be here to support the endeavor that you are working on. And let this be clear. Let's all be clear that this don't have to be the last time. I'm here to support in any way that I can, not just because I'm running for office. And that these issues are the issues that I spend lots of time addressing, not just because I'm a professor, but because this is, these are the things that our ancestors paved the way for us to be addressing and created the space for me to be able to be a scholar, to be able to go to school, and we'll talk about that some more, to be able to do what we're doing today.
Absolutely, and that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, Doctor, because you have made it your life's work to deal with just this type of thing right here, race relations and Africana studies. So let me go ahead and give you the floor real quick. I want my listeners to get familiar with Dr. Akil Khalfani. If you can, before we really break down the issues, can you kind of give them a more, I know I kind of got into it a little bit, but nothing's going to be more prevalent than what it comes from the man himself. Can you kind of give the household out there just a brief synopsis of your history and your past and your credentials?
Without a doubt. So first and foremost, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, and we grew up in a big family, as you clearly know. And but from there, I decided to go to undergrad school. I went to the University of California, Santa Cruz, and I was a first generation college student. So my parents, didn't have college degrees. My grandparents didn't have college degrees, and neither did my aunts and uncles. But something inside of me, motivated me to do that. And I got the information that my parents helped to push me in front of me and around me to expose me to something that hadn't been there. And so I went to the University of California, Santa Cruz. I got my bachelor's in sociology there, and then once I graduated, I spent a little time at the University of California, Irvine. I worked there for a while and learned some important lessons, and decided it was time to go back to school, and I wanted to get a doctorate. So ended up going to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I got my master's and my doctorate in sociology and African studies at the University of Pennsylvania. And while I was there, though, I spent some time in South Africa. I lived in South Africa. Yeah, I went to the University of Pretoria, and I studied Zulu and Afrikaans. So ek kan praat en verstaan 'n bietjie Afrikaans, en ingi kuluma isi Zulu kancane, speak a little Zulu. But lived there for a while, studied, and when I got back here, I finished up my dissertation, and I used my dissertation to produce my first book. And my first book is called The Hidden Debate. It looks at affirmative action in South Africa and the United States. And I was on the East Coast already, and I decided, building a family, was decided to stay out this way.
Yeah.
But all the time I'm there, I'm also engaged in, community service, political activism, while I was in grad school. And then when I got here, what I ended up doing in New Jersey was I started working. I first taught at Seton Hall University and then at Fairleigh Dickinson, but then settled on Essex County College. And I've been here for the past 15 years. And here I'm the director of the Africana Institute. I've done that for almost about 14 years now. And the director of the Center for Global Education and Experiences, and I started that about 2 years ago. Then I have a TV show at the college called The Pulse, and I've been doing that for about 9-10 years now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I have a talk show called The Pulse, and we interview people from all around the world, talking about what's on the pulse of the African diaspora community. So people can look up issues of The Pulse on YouTube. If you put my name in, and do that. One of my last interviews was with I won't say last, but I married Baraka. I interviewed him just before he passed. And so I have a bunch of people like that, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, and other people from around the globe.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, man. And then, I spent time with other folks in different parts of the world, and I met the king from they call him the Oni, from Ile-Ife, Nigeria, and we had some really good interactions and experiences together, and he asked me to be a cultural ambassador to him. So I became a cultural ambassador to the Oni, and been doing stuff around the world with regard to that. And writing, I have some stuff I've written. I co-authored an Introduction to Sociology textbook. I had some writings in the W.B. Du Bois Encyclopedia. And as you said, I ran for office a couple of times. We didn't win, but we keep pushing, So those are the things that I do. And then raising my family, I have 4 children, and my wife. We live here in West Orange, New Jersey, and we just keep pushing, brother.
And that's what we got to do, man. And you've accomplished so much. I mean, you just have. You've done so much, and you're still fighting the good fight. And that's one thing that I really wanted to talk about, is that now that we're seeing these civil rights protests going on, and we've been on day 13. When you guys listen to this out there, it's going to be Friday morning, 6 a.m. So put in your house, in your ears. But let me ask you this, and just so people can get a good feel of your place in this fight. How many protests have you been to at this point?
So I've been to 3 already.
Yeah.
And then I'm organizing another one for this week, or co-organizing, and then I have another one on the weekend. So it'll be Saturday after people hear this simulcast. That I will have another one this Saturday. And so, it's about staying in the middle of stuff. And actually, there was one more. I forgot about. I had another one. So I've been to four different, and all of them were in different municipalities or cities. And people have been. There's been some of them. One of them was the one in Newark was. Over 4,000 people, 5,000 people.
Wow.
The one in West Orange was about 2,000 or 3,000. The one in Berkeley Heights was about 1,000 people, and then there was others that were smaller. So the one in Rahway had about maybe about 15 people. But the thing is that people are out there in all of these different municipalities all across the United States and the world, and so that it lets you know that there's a lot of momentum and pain and frustration and confusion that people are having. And so those are some of the things that we need to address.
Absolutely, and I agree with that, and that's one of the reasons that's one of the many reasons why I wanted to have you on this show. So let me ask you this: you being the elder cousin in our family, you know what I mean? Obviously, you've seen a lot more than myself, a lot more than our other cousins. So I want to ask you this: have you seen in your lifetime race relations be this? I mean, this heated as it is right now in your lifetime? Is this the most prevalent, or can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah. So let me just address that in a couple of ways.
Sure.
One is that there's been lots of different things that have happened during my lifetime. First and foremost was in 1992. I lived in Los Angeles through the Rodney King Rebellion, and I'll never forget that day. This was after the verdict was being read, and I lived in Inglewood at the time, but literally only maybe 5 minutes from the sparked point where everything started with Reginald Denny. So on that day, though, I was leaving my job or leaving my work. I worked in the field. I was doing some college recruiting for UC Irvine. And that day I was recruiting at schools in Watts and Compton. And so I was driving all through the streets in Watts and Compton and other parts of South Central coming to my house.
Yeah.
And as I was driving down the street, they were reading the verdict. And I'm telling you, the air got thick that day. You could literally cut the air with a knife.
Yeah.
Because after they read the first verdict and said that the person was not convicted, they were all the charges were seen as they got off on all the charges.
Yeah.
So the first officer, and then as I was driving down, people started coming out in the streets, talking to one another. People were talking across cars because they were in dismay. They couldn't believe. And then by the time they read the fourth verdict, it was hundreds of people just in the streets, just in dismay.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that people don't, looking at back today, people don't understand is that was the first time ever we had live video recording of an African person of African descent being beat up by the police. People have been beat up by the police for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, but this was a case where we believed there was no way that a jury, a judge, or anybody else could say that we didn't see him being beat and that the police should be convicted clearly with no ifs, ands, or buts. Because remember, on that case, there was maybe 20 or more officers who were on the scene when the whole thing went down from different police departments, because they said they were on a 120 mile per hour speed chase of Rodney King.
Yeah.
So all that to say that as LA burned, I was there in the middle of it. I remember putting out, there was a brother who had a dry cleaner. I remember putting a fire out. I took a random water hose and I put the fire out in his dry cleaners.
Wow.
And this was my neighborhood where I grew up.
Yeah.
And so all the places where I grew up, I could see, and the places I frequented, businesses I frequented, they were almost all of them burnt down. But then the other thing that you saw that you haven't seen here today is that you had all these signs that said black-owned business. Then this was a constant refrain over and over again, because what would happen is that all the non-black-owned businesses were the ones that got burned.
Yeah.
So even some non-black-owned businesses got people would put signs up saying stuff like that, so that they wouldn't get burnt out.
Wow.
But in the end, what you see from that experience is that there was a long history of racial tension, And people were trying to get people to understand that that they were being abused and taken advantage of by non-black owned businesses. And so that's the reason why, if it was a black-owned business, 9 times out of 10, it didn't get burnt or vandalized, because people were respecting the differentiation between the people who abused them and the people who they thought didn't abuse them.
Yeah.
And so those are the kind of things we have to think about, that it wasn't a riot as people try to suggest. It was a rebellion.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not saying that the burning of the buildings and all that stuff was the best solution, but it was the solution that the people who were there at the times, that came to them, because they didn't really, the looting, people take it out of context, is really an attack on capitalism, right?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily people who are randomly just taking advantage of a situation. It's saying that there's extreme economic exploitation, and unless that economic exploitation is addressed, then here's an opportunity for me to address it, because it's unwilling to, you advertise all these things to me that look great, but I can never afford them.
Yeah.
And so here I'm going to strike back at you. And so it's really a strike back at the system is what people are doing. And some people didn't just take stuff; they took stuff to sell stuff. So, or some people took stuff that was just frivolous shoes and stuff like that. They took food and other kinds of things. So there wasn't, the stories put about who was doing the looting and who was doing this and that and the other was also a distortion, because what happened then is that the people who were looting in the news, oftentimes it portrayed it as just people of African descent, African Americans. But in reality, there were Jewish people and Muslim people and Latino people and Asian people and European Americans and all kinds of folks in between who were involved in that. And then there was people who were burning their own businesses trying to get insurance money. And some of those people got caught. So all of those things were going on. And we have to look at those things and say, even those people who were trying to fleece the insurance companies, that why would they risk that, right?
Yeah.
Because there were still extreme economic challenges in the United States, right? And so then those communities would, even though it took a long time for them to be redeveloped, the question is, would they have been redeveloped if there hadn't been the burning, right? So you take Newark in 67, it happened again. You take Los Angeles in 1965, after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., over 120 municipalities burned in the United States. So that gives you the kind of understanding that this thing is not new. With Rodney King in 1992, there were march and protests all over the world. It wasn't just something that happened. That was so that incident, not as big as this one, but it still happened on a magnitude that was international. It wasn't just something that was localized to Los Angeles or to the United States. So those are the things we have to look at in terms of why this is the way it is, and what makes it be sustained in the way it is. So it has happened in my lifetime, and I'm a sociologist. My area of expertise is race relations and social stratification, and finding solutions to those things. So I'm not one to delude myself about that the world we live in is one that's free of racism or white supremacy and all that stuff. I know clearly that they exist and operate, but even me running for office is trying to develop solutions to address those things. We need to have progressive people in office.
No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense, and that's why we need that's why we need people with that type of mindset, people that are progressive and have seen these things. So because that's the thing. We have so many people in office that are just repeating history, and we're seeing a lot of that right now, man. And you were talking a little bit about the looting and the rioting, and that has been a hot topic in these protests. And from what I have seen, now I personally went to a protest myself just this past Saturday, and it was very peaceful. It was very organized. You know, everybody was there for the same, was there for the same message. There were, people was handing out waters and snacks and encouraging people to vote. But then you go on the news and you see that the narrative gets flipped to focus on things such as looting and rioting, to take away from the Black Lives Matter movement, to try to discredit the Black Lives Matter movement. And from what I see, I live in the Midwest and in Indiana, and I'll be the first to say, and it just is what it is. It's not the most enlightened state in the United States. So when people see, when they see what's going on the news, they take it and they take it for face value. Do you feel like that the media taking this looting and rioting and focusing on it, do you feel like it's an attempt to take away from the Black Lives Matter movement, and is it succeeding from your perspective?
Mm-hmm. Right. So when you think about the whole thing with, there's 2 points here. One, to kind of clarify things about Black Lives Matters, and the other is the media, and so I would like to address those two separately.
Sure, please.
With regard to the first, the Black Lives Matter, let's look at that, right? So that the argument or the clarion call for Black Lives Matter is really two sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. That is, that one side says Black Lives Matter, mm-hmm. the other side of the coin says I am a man. When you look back in the 60s, when there was the struggle for civil rights and human rights, and what they argued about was, and the placard said, "I am a man." It's no different than saying Black Lives Matter. And the reason I say that is that what they were talking about is that you don't recognize my humanity. Right? Yeah. It wasn't being a man or a woman. It was about humanity. Yeah. And you don't respect my humanity. You don't appreciate my humanity, and mm-hmm. you don't treat me in humane ways. Yeah. And so the call is to be treated like a human, not like a dog or some other kind of chattel, right? So because the idea of this is really going back to chattel slavery, and that we were seen as property, no different from a cow or a pig. And so that if you watch the video, the way that after they executed, because that's what that was, it was an execution. Yeah. After they executed Brother
George
Floyd,
yeah.
What you see that happened is that they just flung his body over like it was a piece of meat. They had no recourse for the fact that, oh my God, maybe he's injured, maybe he's asphyxiated, maybe he can't breathe, maybe we need to do CPR, maybe we need to turn him over gently so he doesn't injure his head since he's passed out. No, they just flung him over like a piece of meat in a butcher shop. And so that goes to show the disdain that they had for him as an individual and for anybody around watching, right? Because you have to remember that there was people around, and the girl videotaping was a young little 17-year-old girl who was doing this. So that means that she had the wherewithal through the trauma to document this whole thing. And so then you have to recognize that she was traumatized by this whole experience. And how does this negatively affect her for the rest of her life? And she's been getting threats and challenges. And, that's another discussion to have. But the impact that people are saying, why is she doing something? What is a 17-year-old young girl going to do there was 4 police officers there with guns, yelling and screaming and murdering an African man? What is she going to do? Get murdered too?
Right.
So it's absurd to think that she could have done something else. Who was she going to call? The police? So we have to think about those things in real ways, man.
Yeah.
And the other part is that when we think about Black Lives Matter, people always want to belittle it and say, well, all lives matter. Okay, I take that. All lives matter. Blue lives matter. White lives matter. Okay, I take it. Those lives matter. I'm not taking anything from that. But it's not really about Black Lives Matter. It's about Black humanity is not being appreciated and respected.
Yeah.
You can't say that for blue humanity, if they want to say that, it's not being. Police officers are respected all the time. You can't say white humanity is not respected because it's appreciated all the time. So that's the context where people are trying to, they're trying to diminish the impact of what the saying is by translating it to something else and suggesting that the people who are saying Black Lives Matter are saying it at the expense of somebody else. No, you just I don't spend a whole lot of time on that argument, but that's the unpacking of that foolishness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the other part was about the media.
Yeah.
And so, with the media, I don't want to cast any one broad brush stroke because I wouldn't put CNN and Fox and MSNBC and BBC and Al Jazeera and the black press, including you, all in the same swath because there's different approaches, different understandings, and different interpretations of what's going on. But there are there's a whole gambit of it. So you have on one extreme, you have the conservative places like Fox and all the other new radio and TV news and podcasts and everything else that are very conservative, and they're acting as though that the protests have no place, no standing. And I would suggest to us that's if we didn't, what would be happening today, right? There was a brother who was killed on the turnpike in New Jersey recently. What would happen with his case if nobody says anything? What would happen to Floyd? And the other part about, we need to get into this too. I don't have all the details, but we do know that Floyd knew this cop outside of that environment, that both of them were acted as bouncers at a club.
Wow.
So so to suggest that they never knew each other is yet another whole piece. And I don't know if they're going to bring this into the court case or not. I hope they do.
Yeah,
because here it is that somebody who you may have had a beef with at another level, it's not some random guy you didn't know. So if you had some other kind of beef with him, then that even takes it to another level. So now this becomes, in my interpretation, that this is basically premeditated, right?
Yeah.
And there was one of the federal prosecutors who said premeditation doesn't take months and weeks to do. You can that can happen in the middle of something. Maybe when he pulled him over, he said, I got him. I don't know if he said that or not, but those are the kinds of things we have to think about. When did he decide that he was going to brutalize this person to the point of killing him?
Yeah.
And so those are things we have to take into consideration. But the media, on the other hand, other levels, basically we have to look at and we have to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
But we also have to look at and value alternative media sources.
Sure.
So there's a lot of alternative media that bring other perspectives to the whole thing, and we have to look at those perspectives and try to figure out how do we approach those in ways that provide other kinds of insight into what we're doing, and so then that becomes a place where we look for voices that are more balanced, voices that are more holistic, voices that bring in other experts, other kinds of experts, other kinds of insights that you may not get on a CNN, and that's how we have to. That's how we have to do it. We can't let just the standard media that's really owned by just a handful of corporations anyway to dictate how we understand the world. We have to interpret it and understand it for ourselves, and look to ourselves for the insights about those things.
Hey guys, this is the director, Con House, of In Your House, and this episode is sponsored by Podcorn. Podcorn is a marketplace connecting podcasters to amazing podcast sponsorship opportunities such as host read ads, interview segments, topical discussions, and more. With Podcorn, there is no middleman. Podcasters of all sizes can browse and choose opportunities right on the platform, set their own rates, and collaborate with brands directly without any exclusivities. You never give up any rights to your podcast, and Podcorn is here to support you at every step to ensure you're protected and compensated for the work that you do for brands. The marketplace mission is to give podcasters transparency, creative control, and freedom, and full control of how and when they monetize. So check the show notes on this episode and you will see a link to www.podcorn.com/podcasters. But now it's time to get back to In Your House.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, and that's one thing that I've kind of preached in this whole series that we began, is that we're trying to get people to understand that they need to educate themselves and keep themselves informed with all facets of different types of media, and so that's a really great point. Now, one thing that I really want to bring up is the fact that a lot of things have broken down. I saw that conservative talking head Candace Owens really just broke down and eviscerated the name of George Floyd in a scathing video. It wasn't really scathing, but definitely she just said that he's not a hero. She said that he's not what everybody's making him out to be. But I do see him as the breaking point in what's been a long line of as you said, executions of black men. Now I see people that want to take George Floyd and bring up his past, but they don't want to talk about Philando Castile. They don't want to talk about Breonna Taylor. They don't want to talk about Ahmaud Arbery. What is it about wanting to bring up an African American's past and trying to discredit his life? Whether has made mistakes in his life at some point, or even some that haven't, like some of the names that I just rolled out. How does this help what are they hoping to gain to help their argument by trying to discredit them? And is this a part of systematic racism?
Right, and I think that you hit the nail on the head, right? Because when you think about these issues, that racism is not something that is let's take a step back, right?
Sure.
Because we have a lot of times we have these conversations and people have a misunderstanding of what racism is. So we talk about racism, but then what we do is we equate racism with bias or with prejudice, right? So racism is a specific type of bias or prejudice. And a bias or a prejudice is that you just have a prejudice against something or someone, or that you dislike for one reason or another. You could have some kind of bias against people who are tall or people who are short or whatever, but that's different than being racist. And then the other part about it is what you do with the biases. How do you act upon them and those things?
Yeah.
So, but racism specifically is the power, right? So racism deals with power. Racism is the power to negatively affect the life chances of a group of people, right, based on their race. And so when you think about it that way, and that's, as a sociologist, that's how we would define it.
Sure, yeah.
Then when you think about it that way, that people of African descent, black people, can't be racist. We can be prejudiced. We can have bias, but we don't have the power to negatively affect the life chances of European Americans or white people, right? And so that's the difference between what you hear on the news and what the reality is of the definition and the way it plays itself out. And I think it's important that we have that dialogue because people forget about power and they forget about the piece that they want to equate everything with it. They equate somebody being anti-Semitic with racism, or somebody being Islamophobic. They'll call that racism. No, that's not racism. Those are biases against religions, right? So that Judaism is a religion, Islam is a religion. So if you are anti those religions, then that's not racism. That's something different, right? It's another kind of bias or prejudice. And so we have to stop what we would call conflating, putting all these things together, making them seem as though they're the same thing, but they're not the same thing. They may have similar attributes, but they're not the same thing. Right. And that's what the media, that's one of the things where the challenges or problems we have with the media is that the media will do things like make those things all seem the same. And then it kind of what we call homogenizes everything. And so it diminishes the impact of things. And so like what you're asking about with Breonna Taylor, then that those things get associated all together and it overlapped and, well, so-and-so did something too, and this person did that. No, okay, but those things are different. Let's not equate all of them. Yeah. Right? With Breonna Taylor, I mean, come on. She was in her own house in a wrong place that they went to. Yeah. And just like the other one, I don't remember all the names, but where the brother was in his house and the woman who was a cop shot or came in and broke in and he was in his own house and she thought she was at her house, but she wasn't. Yeah. So why does he become a victim? Why does a cop shoot somebody in a car, right? Yeah. And there's a baby in the back and a woman sitting next to him, right? I mean, is that's beyond heartless, right? Yeah, so these kinds of things happen over and over again, but it's because of white supremacy. That is the ideas that Europeans see themselves as supreme, and not that this is all white people or all European Americans, but that we have to, when we think about these things, we have to remember that that there's privilege that comes with these things, and so that we have to look at the history of the privilege that goes with it. In my book, I write about the opposite of affirmative action. There's a whole history in the United States and South Africa of what I call affirmative privilege. And affirmative privilege was when the government affirmed privileges for the benefit of European Americans and to the disadvantage of African Americans. So that white people in the United States, when there was a desire to move, to expand out to the West, that there were over 100 acres of land would be given to people to move. Given. These were land grants. Whereas we talk about 40 acres and a mule, well, when you go back and look at that, those 40 acres were loans, right? They were loaned. Yeah. And that then most of that, there were some people who got some land after the Civil War, but then that land was taken back. So we don't have a true history of understanding of history. There's a great book that people should read. It's called White Rage, and it's a powerful book, and it just breaks down the U.S. history in a way that I think that most people haven't seen. But what we suffer from really is two things. One is we suffer from trauma. Yeah. Right. Oh yeah. That we've been traumatized as a people over and over and over again, and we have histories of trauma. And so some of the things that we do that are detrimental to self are because of the traumas as a result of enslavement and white supremacy, racism over and over again, sexism over and over again that we have encountered, that those things are the things that we've been traumatized. There's a brother who wrote a great book. His book is called My Grandmother's Hands. And in there he talks about racialized trauma, and I believe it's called the Pathways to Healing or something of that nature. But he talks about that trauma is generational, and it passes on in the genes. And they did some studies, and he shows all the things that how that trauma it causes adrenaline to flow, and that adrenaline has negative impacts on the body. And if, as a wrestler, you know that your adrenaline is pumping when you're in the wrestling. But if you can imagine somebody having to live like that 24/7, that same adrenaline that is always going through your body, and that when an egg is fertilized, that if that's the combination of the egg being traumatized and the sperm being traumatized, then that means what's developed already has trauma in it before it even is born. And so those are the things we have to look at in terms of the experiences. Man,
and that's a lot of good points.
Yeah. So, the other part about that, though, is that the outside of the trauma, the other major thing is that racism is our real disease. So the problem in America is the disease that we have in America is not COVID-19, it's racism. Racism is the pandemic. And until we come up with an inoculation to racism, then COVID-19 will continue to seem like the common cold. And the disease of racism is generational. The disease of racism is something that infects both the person who is on the receiving side of the racist experience and the person who's the dishing it out. I mean, think about this. When we think about enslavement of African people, that even though Europeans were not brutalized, by it, and they had all kinds of benefits from it, but they also enslaved themselves by the very system that they used for their own benefits. They had to live under an environment that was constantly tense, constantly filled with negativity, negative energy, and hate, and all these things that were negative affected everybody. Think about, they would go take their children to a lynching and watch the child, and the child would watch the person be lynched, and they would be taught to celebrate that.
Oof.
Now, you can't tell me that that's not trauma that child is experiencing, but they're taught to think that trauma is something that they should be enjoying.
That's deep. That's really deep. That's real heavy right there. And it's true too. And I think that trauma has a lot to do with this. And you broke it down and made a whole lot of good points as far as how it affects the African American community and how we react when things go down, like altercations with the police. Now, let me ask you this. I do want to touch a little bit on at some point on white shame, but I want to talk a little bit about white privilege right now. Now, one thing that I've noticed is that for me personally, I've had a lot of my non-melanated friends reach out and try to figure out, man, what can I do? What can I do to help the movement? I want to learn more. I want to educate myself. But on the flip side of that, there's the people that are just not trying to hear it. They don't want to learn more. In fact, they're doubling down on the racism, and they insist that it's not racist. So I'd like to hear from your point of view. What is it that makes this generation, even in my age range, even some folks a little bit younger than myself in their mid-20s are doubling down on it? Do you think it's because it's been taught to them and they're maybe afraid to speak out because they don't want to upset their racist uncle or racist father or racist grandfather or anything? Do you think it's something generational to where they don't want to speak out because they're afraid of that, or is there more to it?
Both of those things and more. So my initial thing is that they double down. Think about why somebody doubles down. Or another thing you can say, maybe instead of double down, is that that they recoil. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's like a snake when it feels like it's backed up in a corner. It feels threatened, and it's going to strike harder. It's going to strike. It's going to be in a position. It's going to position itself to strike. Yeah. Right. Yeah. With any animal, right? That's how they respond. So part of the recoiling is the fact that by addressing racism and white supremacy and all these issues, and if it's dismantled, that people know that they're going to lose access to the privileges that they feel entitled to. So the privileges that they feel entitled to are going in the store and never being looked at as if they are going to steal anything. They can go walk up to a police car and know that the police officer is their friend. Yeah. They don't have to walk down the street and have somebody walk to the other side of the street because they think somebody's going to cause them harm, or their perception of that. They can go to the bank and know that they're not going to not get a loan because of the color of their skin. If they get denied, it's because of their credit. It's because they didn't have enough assets. They didn't have enough equity somewhere else. But they don't have to go there thinking that, well, because of the pigment of my skin, I might not get this. That's white privilege. Yep. And so if somebody thinks that everybody else is going to have the same access as them, then maybe what they fear, because really that's why they recoil, because they have fear, right? Yeah. There's a great book. This is not just in the United States. This is all over the world. The same thing happens. In South Africa, there's a guy named Vincent Crapenzano. He wrote a book called Waiting. And in that book, he was talking about that Europeans in South Africa, the Afrikaners, the British, that they were always in fear. They were always waiting for something to never happen. They were always waiting for the Africans in South Africa to rebel. And all the times that they were expecting them to rebel, they never did. The rebellions always happened when they thought that nothing was going to happen, and something happened then. But they were waiting, and that's the point I was making before about the fact that white supremacy creates this fear, because now they fear that they're going to lose something. They fear that the people who they've been stealing whatever they've been stealing from for so many years and preventing them from having access to the normal things of life are going to be fed up with it and take their rightful place in society.
Hey, there it is, right there. And that's a really good point, because when I've had honestly, doctor, I've had this argument on the internet more times than I'd even like to admit. But what happens is they do just that. They recoil. That's a really good word for it. They recoil and they attack, and then it's like you said, it's backing them up against the wall, and they're not down for it. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to have any part of it. They choose to not be educated to these issues. Now, one thing that I do want to ask you, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, especially in the position that you're in, as far as running for U.S. Congress. Are you for or against? And break it down however you want to, defunding the police?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. The question becomes, what does that mean, right? Yeah. And I don't think in American society that defunding the police means what it sounds like on the surface. Yeah. But first, let's go back to the police. Let's actually look at the police. Yeah. Right. So that the police in the United States, as an entity, came about and then this is different from the sheriffs. They always had sheriffs for many, many years, but the police and local police, municipal police as we know them today, were originally formed as militias, as slave catchers, and so that racist mentality embedded into what we know today as the police force comes from that, and so that we have to look at the history of when and where and how all the local police forces were developed throughout the United States. It's like we don't really do historical studies. We don't do historical analysis. I'll give you another prime case example. When I used to run something called the Urban Issues Institute.
Okay.
And when I ran the Urban Issues Institute, I would have mayors and city council people and business administrators for different municipalities throughout the state of New Jersey come and do lectures at the college with the students. And one time I had one of the business administrators, either a business administrator or a city council person, came and gave a really interesting analysis. He said that where did the idea of the freeways or the highways come from in the United States? And most people say, well, it was created for urban and blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, that's not where it comes from. It said most people think that because they don't do their homework. So where the idea of the freeways came is after the 60s, when you had all these urban rebellions. It came because it came from the Department of Defense, because that was the way they were building these roads to create ways to have military come to urban areas to address civil unrest, and to have the heavy equipment for the military, that the standards that were needed to bring in heavy-duty equipment required thoroughfares that had a different type of construction and that had direct routes where they could shut off and close off those areas. So that if you look, when I was in LA in '92, that's exactly what happened with the freeways. They closed off certain on-ramps and off-ramps, and you couldn't get off of the freeway in South Central Los Angeles. Only on the outskirts, and then you had to take the streets in. And then they had not the Coast Guard, what is the military? I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden. They had the reserves to block off those areas, and they put concrete barricades so you couldn't get on or off in those urban areas. And so that's how they controlled it, though. And when you look, and then that's how the military came in. When it came in, and they went to the Coliseum. Their headquarters. I have pictures from this in '92. The Coliseum had hundreds of tanks and, well, maybe not tanks, but armored personnel carriers and Humvees and all kinds of other stuff. But that's where they were. They were all. That's how they set up shop. And so we look at these things and we begin to understand that the larger point here being that until we do the real history and go read and study, we don't know why things are the way that they are. And so when we're talking about the police, how did the police become the police that they are today, and who did they harass? So back in the early 1900s, they harassed the Irish and other the Italians, but they still stemmed from something else. Yeah. And so when we look at where it stemmed from, even the idea, you ever heard of a paddy wagon?
Paddy wagon, yeah.
Well, you know that a paddy wagon, the paddies referred to the Irish. They were called paddies. Oh. And so that's what the idea of the paddy wagon came from.
Wow.
It's not some random name, but we don't have an understanding of those things.
Oh, man. No, I did. I mean, I've already learned a whole lot from this episode, but I learned something else too. But it's wild to me, because that's the whole point of this, is to educate and try to bring everybody together and understand that this is a big step towards real actual change, and we have to keep pushing and moving forward. And for me to say that is for me to say this, Doctor, is I want to go back and say how I was addressing white shame, how there are actually white people that actually feel bad about the past and feel bad about how their ancestors and other white people have held us down and made us feel uncomfortable, and how we've tried to, how even myself have tried to make them feel comfortable so they don't fear me, because that's what it is. It's white fear. What would you, being in your profession and your education, everything that you've done with the Africana studies, race relations, I've had so many people ask me, what can they do? How can they help? But I don't have the depth of knowledge that you have. So I feel like the best way to get that type of answer is by getting it from somebody like you that has put forth so much work and effort into just what we're dealing with now and today. What would you say that a white person who considers themselves an ally, what is the best way for them to help support the movement?
Yeah, I think that we should start a new organization, and we should start a war, and the war is whites against racism. Right?
Ooh, yeah.
When you think about it, in the end, the only people who can end racism are the people who are actually acting in racist ways, and that racism is not just individuals, but it's the institutions of racism, the institutions of white supremacy. And so that those who are in control of those institutions, for the most part, are white or European American. And so therefore, they are the ones who have the power to end or change those institutions. So that takes you back to the whole idea of defunding the police that you were talking about. Yeah. That the idea of defunding the police is that the police structure, the way it is right now, its institution is not going to look at and police itself in ways that are revolutionary. And revolutionary means it's dramatically transformative. Yeah. So that if they're not going to do it, then defunding them means that you have to start something that's new, right? So that maybe what you have is the people who understand what that means is that once you've changed it or ended it and start something new, then maybe what you end up with is peace officers who are about peace, and who try to bring about peace, who strive for and towards peace, who are experts in de-escalation as opposed to escalating things, right? Who, if they need to use a firearm, that is the very, very last thing that they do. That if they need to use a firearm, that their training no longer uses body cavities as targets, that you would shoot somebody if you had to in the arm or the hand or the leg to maim them, to stop them from their aggression, but you don't need to kill anybody. We police officers train, and we have family who are police officers. My grandfather who's a police officer, sheriff, and so then. But my thing is that as long as people are training for head and body cavity targets, then that's what they're going to shoot. And until we change that mentality, you're going to need to do something that's revolutionarily different. And so the idea behind defunding the police department is that you're defunding a system that says to the world that it's corrupt, that it condones white supremacy and racism, that it condones the brutalization of people. I just was saw something somebody sent me the other day. I don't even know if it's true or not, but we know that cases like Abner Louima, where he was sodomized. Now, what would by officers in the precinct? What would they have there? They didn't recognize his humanity, right? What would make them think to do something like that, other than to damage, harm, or maim somebody in a way that is animalistic? And so those people, if they're allowed to remain on the force, that means that there's others like them there, and that they are willing to protect them. And that's what happened, is that these folks are protected. It doesn't mean that we don't need police officers. It doesn't mean that we don't have officers who are upstanding, but it means that we have a lot who are not upstanding. It means that we have a culture and systems of oppression in the police departments. Those systems are inherently racist by nature. And so until those racist systems are dismantled, you're going to continue to have the brutalization of African people across the country.
Yeah, and that's a big thing there. That's a big thing there, is that the way that the institution works, the way that it's so, the racism is so ingrained within it that you're correct. It would be something that we'd have to tear it down basically and build it back up, and that's a lot of good points. And of course you said it a lot better than I could, and that's one of the reasons that we had you on here. But the last question I want to ask you before we go ahead and call this a really great episode, and of course we'll have you let everybody know where they can find you at and find your information, and just kind of plug so everybody can kind of get a better understanding. But this is a question that is so broad, so big, and I presented it on the second episode, and it was really a question that was so hard for Brother Barrington to answer. Now, but I want to ask you, with your vast knowledge and intelligence and informativeness on this topic. As of right now, we're on day 13. Day 13 of the protest. It doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon, and it's been heavy. It's been really, really strong and pushing really hard. I don't see it ending anytime soon. So my question for you is, what is going to be sufficient enough? What is going to need to be done? And like I said, this might not be an easy question to answer, but what is going to need to be done to make these protests stop?
So I'll take that in a couple of ways.
Sure.
One, I'm not looking for them to stop. Right?
Yeah.
There is no, if the system hasn't and or doesn't change, then why should they?
Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
Unless you disrupt the normal mode of operation, the system is going to continue to do what it's designed to do. It's going to continue to do those things that are going to marginalize people. It's going to do the things that allows racism and racists to do what they do in society, because the system both rewards and expects that the system uses racism and white supremacy for the benefit of certain other individuals, right? So there's a group of folks who benefit from conflict and tension going on because it keeps things operating in a certain way. And I think that when we look at this, that when is it going to stop? Hopefully it stops when there's change, right? So, like, for instance, if you look at the Montgomery bus boycott, you're talking about that was 380 something, I think 381, 82, 380 something days that they boycotted that. So that was a long time. They walked. They found other ways, modalities to do what they had to do to get to work and to school and to everything else. But they did not ride the bus until there was a change. And so then that was in essence the defunding of the bus system. You see what I'm saying? They literally defund by their withdrawing their participation. They defunded it.
That's a good point.
So the people can defund lots of things. If there's other things that people think that are not doing things that are operating against them, then they should defund them. You see what I'm saying? But that takes strategic and thoughtful analysis and commitment. And so, but I think that the strategy needs to be multi-pronged. So let me get on to why I'm running, right?
Please.
And that is that I'm running for Congress because we don't have concerted voices that are pushing strong, progressive issues and ideas that are going to be that are consistently fought for, that will bring the voice of the people, right? So I'm running because I'm running as the voice of the people, and I want to bring the voice of the people to Washington. I want to have legislation that's going to bring the hearts and minds of the people to Washington, D.C., so that we have legislation and regulations that demonstrate that the people who the politicians represent is at the forefront of what's going on. We haven't really seen that. We see people in office, and there's some politicians who are reputable, but then there's others who just want to be in office. We see them there. They get money from this corporation and that corporation, and they continue to do the same things they've been doing, but they don't come back with substantive changes to the community. And so I'm here to pledge to bring some substantial changes to the community, to fight for substantial changes. But we need other progressive folks who are willing to push the envelope and make sure that our voices are heard collectively. Because it's not just about me; it's about we.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And see that that's a lot of good points right there. And just having this conversation with you, I know myself, I feel enlightened. I really feel like that the household is going to be the same way. They're going to be very enlightened for this episode, and I really hope that they are. So before we go ahead and ride off into the sunset and call this a really great episode, because it was very informative, educational, and that's exactly what I was going for. Where can my listeners maybe catch some of your books, maybe catch your talk show, and let them know about your you're running for Congress. Kind of break that down a little bit, in a little bit more depth, but just let them know where they can find you if they want to follow you and kind of get more information on Dr. Akil Khalfani.
Sure. So first and foremost, they can go to my website, which is Akil Khalfani. That's AKILKHALFANI.com, and that's where you'll find all the information about the campaign and the things we're working on. My book, The Hidden Debate, it's available on Amazon and other places, they can. I'm on Facebook. We're modifying our WhatsApp, our Instagram and Twitter feeds and all that stuff. But I'm on those platforms as well. And, we just want to make sure that folks know that they can reach out to us, that we are here, committed and ready, and we need their support, because this is a movement. This is not just a campaign. And that's how my campaign committee, that's what I tell them all the time. I say, look, this is not Akil Khalfani. This is a movement for us to change the fabric of American society. And if there's no other case that's making that point for us, is what's going on with all these protests around the country. In the face of a pandemic, people are willing to come out because they're sick and tired of it, or as Fannie Lou Hamer said, it was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so we need to get to the place where we're willing to fight and to continue to push the envelope, and not to accept mediocrity from politicians, not to accept selfishness, right? That people want to be self-aggrandizing. But people need to be in there, and people in Congress need to be able to and be willing to argue and have debates back and forth without stonewalling, so that they can hear the other side. Because that's oftentimes, unfortunately, the thing that we don't. People get the Democrat or Republican or whatever else, and they never listen to the other side. They close their ear. If it's not Republican, I'm not listening. If it's not Democrat, I'm not listening. No, we need to open our ears so that we engage in dialogue. And we need to have what I call courageous conversations.
Oh, I like that.
Conversations that push the envelope, but that we're open to listening, so that we can see that maybe we might be wrong, so that we can see that maybe there's another solution in this path that we're headed on. And if we do those things, then we can recognize that there can be some change in the world in which we live. We can create that. But until we get to the place where we address these hard issues, and prison reform is one, working on mortgage foreclosure, a moratorium on mortgage foreclosure is another, having a better push for the environment. I have a whole thing that I'm working on for that. There's some people working on a Green New Deal, and I agree with aspects of it, but we need to do better and push stronger on that. We need to talk about reparations. We need to push for reparations, and we need to articulate what does that mean. And we're gonna put a platform out there so people understand what that means and why it's necessary. So those are some of the things that we're working on, and we got to get. Just like I said, racism deals with people that white people have to work on it. We need to set up a new organization called WAR. We also need to make sure that we are working on equal pay for women, right?
Yeah.
Because until men do the right thing by women, there's always going to be unequal pay. And then women, Latino and African American women, are unfortunately at the lowest rung of that. And so we need to address all those issues so that that's not the case. Women make 85 cents, about 85 cents on the dollar for men, and then the African American women make even less. So we've got to get those stats together and make sure that we are addressing those things in more holistic ways.
Yes, absolutely.
So outside of that, the website again is akilkhalfani.com, AKILKHALFANI.com.
Oh man, and yes, absolutely, and I want to say this with everything that you're doing, Akil, all the work that you're putting into running for Congress, going out there and making your voice heard, and still educating all of us. I know you're very busy. I know that you're pushing really hard to make. Because you have a purpose, and I respect that. I really do. Just like I have my own purpose, you have your own purpose, and we're both pushing really hard to try to make some change in our own communities. So I just want to thank you so much for making yourself available, for giving your time to come on this show and speak about these issues and educate us and help us learn and hopefully have those courageous conversations that'll help us push through and get real change. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you, and you're quite welcome, and I wish you all much success, and if you ever need me or want me to come back, please, you know my number. Feel free to reach out anytime, and it doesn't matter if I'm Akil Khalfani professor or if I'm Akil Khalfani congressman. Either way, I'll gladly come back on and talk to you and the people.
Oh man, thank you so much. Bless you, and this made for a really great episode, guys. That was Dr. Akil Khalfani. He's wrestling with the issues just like the rest of us are, and this made for a really educational and informative episode because me and the good doctor gave y'all that work. So let me let you guys know where you guys can listen to this at. You guys can listen to this at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Himalaya. Hey, you don't have an Apple device? That's all right. We're on Google Play. Anywhere that you guys are, we can get to you. It's not stopping, ladies and gentlemen. The Black Awareness Summit continues as we will continue to speak about these issues and try to get you guys educated as to what you can do. Guys, what are you doing? Buy a freaking shirt. That's www.prowrestlingtees.com/inyourhouse. It is already the best seller for this week, one of the top sellers on the entire website, and of course, all the proceeds are going to the Minnesota Freedom Fund and the Bell Project. Guys, you already know what I'm going to say. Hop on this bandwagon and hop on the movement. Get on or get gone. Because the household, we still going mighty strong. You guys have a great day and a great rest of your week. Peace.